This week on Jerusalem Dateline, another terror attack hits the heart of Israel, while the northern border heats up and Iran promises an attack on the Jewish state. Plus, a new book chronicles the rise of ISIS, the savage persecution of Christians, and the return of the Jews to Israel. Are more biblical prophecies coming to pass before our very eyes? And an American hero comes to Israel to lend a hand to Israel's military men and women in arms. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell, coming to you this week from the Promenade, overlooking the city of Jerusalem, including the Temple Mount, the Mount of Olives, and the Old City. It's been an eventful week here in Israel and throughout the Middle East. In Tel Aviv, a 23-year-old Palestinian went on a stabbing spree. He injured 17 people, 4 of them seriously. The terrorist reportedly stabbed the driver first to prevent him from opening the doors to allow passengers to escape. The bus company praised the driver's resourcefulness, bravery, and heroism, saying he tried to protect passengers even after sustaining a deep stab wound to his chest. An elite police unit apprehended the terrorist.
The terrorist fled the area. Special patrol units chased the suspect. He was shot in his leg and is now in police custody. We've heightened security in and around the Tel Aviv area, and we're still searching to make sure that there are no further terrorists in and around the area.
Hamas officials called it a brave and heroic act against Zionists in Tel Aviv and a response to Israel's crimes. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu blamed Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas for these attacks and called them, quote, a direct result of the poisonous incitement being disseminated by the Palestinian Authority against the Jews and their state. This same terrorism is trying to attack us in Paris, Brussels, and everywhere. On Israel's northern border, things began to heat up. Israel deployed several Iron Dome anti-missile batteries in northern Israel following an airstrike that killed 6 Hezbollah terrorists and 6 Iranian soldiers. Israel is bracing for retaliation from the terror group Hezbollah in Lebanon. At a funeral for one of those killed, thousands of Hezbollah supporters chanted, "Death to Israel." Israel refrained from confirming or denying responsibility for the airstrikes, reportedly carried out by a helicopter gunship that targeted as many as 3 SUVs near Syria's Quneitra crossing with Israel at the Golan Heights. Both Hezbollah and Iran vowed to retaliate at a time and place of their choosing. And speaking of Iran, House Speaker John Boehner invited Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to address a joint session of Congress and speak about the grave threats that radical Islam in Iran pose to America's security and way of life. The Obama White House called the invitation a breach of protocol, but it's likely Netanyahu will accept the invitation. A visiting delegation of U.S. senators said many in the region see a nuclear Iran as their #1 threat.
There is great concern that they have expressed both here in Israel and especially in Saudi Arabia about Iran and its activities, whether it be in Yemen or whether it be in Iraq or whether it be in other countries in the region.
As to the Iranian issue, a good deal will be a blessing to the world. A bad deal would be a nightmare.
Despite the recent flare-up on Israel's northern border this week, Israel has been relatively quiet since the Gaza war ended last summer. But the Palestinians are now waging a diplomatic war against Israel, one that they hope will end with a Palestinian state and war crime charges against Israeli leaders. As John Wagi explains, some in Congress are doing what they can to help Israel.
For months now, Palestinian Chairman Mahmoud Abbas has been firing a barrage of diplomatic volleys against Israel. He began last fall with a fire and brimstone speech at the UN General Assembly.
I affirm here that we will not forget, nor will we forgive, or allow war criminals to escape punishment. I affirm before you that the people of Palestine hold steadfast to its legitimate right to defend itself against the Israeli war machine, and through its legitimate right to resist this colonial racist occupation.
Next, he pushed for a Palestinian state without Israel's agreement in the UN Security Council, falling just 1 vote short late last year. Then he turned to the International Criminal Court in the Netherlands, calling successfully for a war crimes probe for Israel's action in Gaza last summer. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu isn't sitting still for the Palestinian offensive in the courts. Both political and military leaders in Israel face possible arrest when they travel abroad.
We see here something truly tragic. The lofty goals of the ICC are being turned upside down. The court was founded to prevent a repeat of history's worst crimes, foremost among them the genocide of 6 million Jews. Now the Palestinians are cynically manipulating the ICC to deny the Jewish state the right to defend itself against the very war crimes and the very terror that the court was established to prevent.
There is bipartisan concern in Congress that Palestinians aren't paying a price for their unilateral moves against Israel, America's strongest ally in the Middle East. And some have threatened a cutoff of billions of dollars in U.S. aid, both for the Palestinian Authority and for UN groups that coddle terrorists. The White House and Congress may be headed for a collision course over the U.S. role in this diplomatic war, but with Israel facing elections in mid-March, both sides are holding much of their fire, for now. John Wagi, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Another front in the battle over the Jewish state is the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, or it's simply called BDS. It's a way to harm Israel economically. And while millions of Christians around the world support the Jewish state with their prayers, now there's a financial way to back Israel. As CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl shows us, it's all about buying blue and white.
Anti-Israel activists around the world use violence and protests to attack the Jewish state. But they've also mounted a campaign to attack its economy by urging countries, churches, and individual investors to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. It's called the BDS movement.
For several years now, there's been this BDS campaign, this effort to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel, part of the delegitimization of Israel movement. In fact, there's been little financial impact, but there is a wide perception, because they've made so much noise, that it's really hurting Israel. And we just felt it was time to counter this with a proactive, positive campaign.
David Parsons says the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is fighting back with an Israel buyer's guide.
A simple booklet based on Madison Avenue branding techniques to show Christian consumers, others out there in foreign countries, what Israeli products and services they can buy in their own countries just by showing the brands.
It contains some 80 different Israeli companies and products that are available in various countries throughout the world. Companies like Ahava, specializing in unique skincare products from the Dead Sea. And Nayot sandals and shoes, famous for their comfort and style, are all part of the guide. According to Parsons, if BDS activists actually got what they wanted, they'd be in trouble.
If the world boycotted Israel, the digital age would come to a standstill, because all the microchips and everything in our iPhones, our iPads, our laptop computers, our cameras, everything has Israel inside.
Parsons says the ICEJ hopes to update the guide each year and make it the go-to place for finding Israeli products and services. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
As the Palestinian Authority continues its relentless bid to create a Palestinian state in the biblical heartland of Israel, some Palestinian insiders say President Mahmoud Abbas's regime is riddled with corruption, paid for by Western tax dollars. Mahmoud Abbas has led the fight for Palestinians since the 2004 death of Chairman Yasser Arafat. In addition to leaving a leadership opening, Arafat left behind secret bank accounts filled with $1 billion or more in public funds and international aid taken from his own people. As Abbas, also known as Abu Mazen, took over, Palestinians hoped for change.
When Abu Mazen came to power, he spoke about reforming the security services and the judiciary. It means that he recognized that there is corruption.
Ahmed lives in a West Bank city under Palestinian Authority control, with hidden his identity to protect his life.
What happened was that they created ways to cover up corruption when complaints were made.
About 2 million people live here in the West Bank, biblical Judea and Samaria, under Palestinian Authority rule. And while the world blames Israel for oppressing Palestinians, some say the Palestinians themselves are most often the oppressors.
Most of the Palestinians know about the corruption, but the normal citizens are afraid because there is terror against them, and they know that they cannot do anything, and they and their families and children could be subjected to dangers and sexual abuse.
Ahmed said authorities lie about people, saying they're dealing drugs, collaborating with Israel, or acting immorally if they have a personal vendetta against someone.
I know another case when somebody asked a man from Fatah to give him his pay, but he refused. After that, a group came after midnight, entered his home, and killed him, and they abused his family and threw him from the window, and beat his children very badly. When people intervened, they issued a statement saying this man was an agent of Israel.
Human rights attorney Caleb Maya says he's concerned both about Israel and also for Palestinians living under Abbas.
If somebody in the Palestinian Authority was to stand in the public square and criticize Mahmoud Abbas, they'll be arrested, many times tortured, and sometimes they just disappear. There's a huge fear factor.
And to make things worse, this corruption and oppression is financially supported by taxpayers in the West. According to a 2014 congressional report, the U.S. government has committed more than $5 billion to the Palestinians since the mid-1990s.
Yet, the average Palestinian is still living in abject poverty.
While Abbas is blasting Israel and pushing hard for recognition of an independent state, some are saying it would only be a disaster. Coming up, a new book that chronicles the events that point to biblical prophecies coming to pass before our very eyes.
Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Julie Stahl. Chris, today we're going to turn the tables and we're going to interview
That's what
you.
I understand.
You've written another book, Destination Jerusalem, ISIS, Convert or Die, Christian Persecution, and Preparing for the Days Ahead. Why did you write this book?
Well, I wrote the book, Julie. It came out of our experiences last summer in northern Iraq in June and August, and that was sandwiched in between the war we had, 50-day war between Hamas and Israel. And I wanted to tell people, first of all, about ISIS, how they came to be, the danger that ISIS poses not only here to Israel, but to Western civilization. I wanted to tell people about Christian persecution. We met with a number of Christians who were persecuted, left their homes, given a choice, convert or die, and people need to know about what's happening to them. And finally, I wanted people to know how to prepare for the days ahead. We live in dangerous, dark days. People need to know what's coming and how to get ready.
So we saw this meteoric rise of ISIS last year. Who exactly are they and where are they going?
Well, the book chronicles exactly how they came to be. The genesis was AQI, which is Al-Qaeda Iraq. They came out of that group, but they really sprung on the world stage on June 10th when they took over Iraq's second largest city, Mosul, which is ancient Nineveh. That's where the prophet Jonah went 3,000 years ago, and he preached his message of repentance to the ancient people of Nineveh. And now they have established what they call a caliphate. Now, this is important because this has been the dream of many Muslims for years, that they would establish their own entity. This is like an Islamic empire, and this is embryonic right now, but they want to actually enlarge that, not only to the region, but around the world.
And what has this meant to the Christians that are living there?
Well, for the Christians, and I have this New Testament right here because this is a story of a guy named Yadi. And when we met him, he told us about his situation. So many of the Christians, thousands of the Christians, tens of thousands of Christians have left their ancient homes that they had been in for generations. And they were told by ISIS, you have 4 choices. The first choice is you could leave. And that means leaving behind almost everything, their possessions, their lives, their livelihood. It also means the second choice was that they could convert. They could say the Islamic creed, the Shahada, and become a Muslim. Or they could die by the sword. And one other choice they had was that they could pay the Islamic tax for infidels or non-Muslims. So right now there are tens of thousands of Christians that are homeless, that are refugees, left and lost everything.
Why are we hearing so little about this in the West?
It's a good question. There are some voices. CBN's Pat Robertson, our boss, is one that has been speaking out about this for many years. Franklin Graham is speaking out about this. Jay Sekulow, the ACLJ, speaks out about Christian persecutions. But really, we're not seeing the kind of chorus you would expect from the Western Church about the Christians here in the Middle East. And I've actually had Jews ask me, why aren't the Christians speaking out? And I really don't have a good answer for them. Ironically, many Jews have spoken out for Christians. You've interviewed Ron Lauder before. He's one that has raised his voice. The Jews know what it means to be silent in the face of this kind of persecution, and hopefully the church will wake up. That's really one of the reasons behind writing the book, was to inform people what's happening to believers here in the Middle East so that they can be informed and raise their voice on their behalf.
So, well, how does Jerusalem figure into this? Destination Jerusalem.
Well, it's interesting that we're here with Jerusalem in the background. The Jews are coming back here from all over the world, this Aliyah, this prophetic fulfillment. Christians around the world are praying for Jerusalem and the peace of Jerusalem like never before. And also many Muslims, like ISIS, they see Jerusalem as the future capital of their caliphate. And so what we're seeing right now, that many forces, both good and bad, want to come here to Jerusalem. And you could say that Jerusalem really is the crossroads of both history and prophecy.
How do we prepare for the
How do we prepare? There's a chapter in there about how to prepare. There's 10 ideas, mainly scriptural admonitions of how to prepare. One is watch and pray. That's what Jesus told us to do. Another one is having a sense of humor. These are dark and dangerous days. They're scary days, but I think we have to have a perspective and a sense of humor in these dark days. And the other thing is a perspective, a heavenly perspective, that you know, Jesus said, when you see all these things, look up, for your redemption draweth nigh. And it's not a coincidence that Jerusalem, we see the Mount of Olives. 2,000 years ago, Jesus ascended into heaven. He promised, when you see all these things happening, he'll come back. So we're living in a season, a very sort of pregnant with prophecy, prophetic fulfillment. And these are some of the things we can do to prepare for the days that are coming.
Well, thank you, Chris. And your book is available on Amazon.com, and we look forward to reading it.
Thanks, Julie. It's great to be with you. And I enjoyed this, having the tables turned. Coming up, an American war hero comes to Israel and suits up for a new role, lending a hand to Israel's military. Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. Each year, thousands of Jews and Christians from around the world come to volunteer to join the Israeli Defense Forces. While everyone that gives their time is special, one U.S. veteran stands out as a hero. Brian Mast served as a U.S. Army bomb disposal expert in Afghanistan when a hidden explosive device took his legs. But that didn't stop him from volunteering for the IDF.
I saw a need in my own country to show positive support for Israel, and I wanted to find a way to do it, so I did.
As Mast watched news coverage of fighting in and around Gaza last summer, he grew frustrated with how the media and world leaders criticized Israel, even though it was under fire. Mast said as a soldier he couldn't agree with the criticism of Israel for defending itself.
If any of our neighbors, whether it be Canada or Cuba or Mexico, were firing rockets into the United States, that guys like me or guys that I served with or anybody else in our military, we would be in those locations immediately to destroy those enemies so that they would never be able to have the capability to do that again.
The conflict, he said, lit a fire under him, and he wanted to come and help.
Coming from a soldier background, I spent 12 years in the service. I wanted to find a way to do that militarily.
Brian came to Israel through a program called STAHL. It brings volunteers from all over the world to help the IDF. Here they're assembling medical kits for soldiers in the field.
We're packaging narcotics that could be used, like morphine. We're packaging tourniquets. We're packaging IVs. These are all things that combat medics carry with them. I myself had 3 tourniquets placed on me when I was injured, and this is the kind of stuff that they need.
Over the years, more than 160,000 volunteers have served through the program. Now about 20% of those volunteers are Christians. STAHL head Israel Gava said the volunteers help with logistics. That frees up soldiers and reservists for other duties.
And they give a hand in maintaining and keeping this equipment. As you see here, this is medical equipment. In some bases you may find people working on controls or in communication equipment, and this is all over the country, almost more than 40 bases.
Corporal Leah Calderoni is a liaison between the base and the volunteers. She says Brian has been a big hit on the base.
I think for all the soldiers that are here also in the base, it's an inspiration. It's a sort of hero also in Israel.
Mass says he was raised in a Christian home that supported Israel and learned Israel was America's brother and greatest ally in the region. That's the message he'll take home.
You know, one of the terms I've learned since being here is the term ahim, the term brothers. And I think that we in the U.S. and those here in Israel, I think we are brothers because we have the same hope and the same desire for the future. We want to see freedom.
Up next, hear firsthand from volunteers from around the world who come year after year to support Israel's military men and women. Welcome back. In addition to Brian Mass, there are thousands of volunteers who come year after year to help the IDF. We thought it'd be nice for you to hear from them about what it's like to come and volunteer with STAHL.
I've been coming here for 9 years straight, and it's a fantastic experience. And I feel the biggest thing that I get out of it is that I can go back home and I can be an ambassador for the state of Israel.
I feel that I have a responsibility to Israel to participate in keeping it safe, secure, and there for people, Jews all over the world, who need to come to Israel.
In 1993, I was given the chance to come here, and I took that chance, and I've been coming ever since. This is my 52nd time.
And it's a very important job that we do here at Matzrap. We supply the medical equipment for all the services of Israel.
If we weren't here, they'd have to call in reservists to do the work, and the volunteers are very energetic. They work hard. They want to work.
I come here to give myself, my time to Israel, to be part of Israel. It's my contribution to Israel. I feel very connected to Israel because I do come here and do the volunteer work.
Try it and learn about the country, learn about the way of life, and also experience the country while being here.
Instead of taking a tour around Europe, they should think about coming here for 2 or 3 weeks. Get the lay of the land. It's a tough neighborhood we live in here, and I'd like them to see how really safe Israel is.
Come to Israel. It's a great place.
Well, hearing their stories, you can see how satisfying and fulfilling it was for them to come year after year and volunteer for STAHL. Well, that's it for this edition. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.